Hi, this is Keeper, and welcome back to On Air Wednesday, November 16th, 2011. Turkey Day is almost here. I can smell it, I can taste it, and I can't wait. 8 short days. Today, 2 great stories. Number 1, our continuing look at politics and its influence on direct selling, as we got a surprise phone call from DSA President Joe Mariano in his response to our groundbreaking, industry-breaking story about the Direct Selling Association's Political Action Committee they don't want distributors to know about. Today will be part 1 of the story. Tomorrow will be the conclusion. Also today, Profiles Encourage Distributor Stories. We will introduce you to our first story, the story of Brittany Herrera. Talk about a story of courage, of overcoming adversity, triumph. You are not going to believe this story. This young 22-year-old Mary Kay distributor has been through hell, and she is seeing daylight at the end of the tunnel. We will see you in a few seconds on air. Okay, welcome back to On Air. Glad you are here to join me. It's going to be a great show. Today, as I said, we're going to be looking at politics and its influence on direct selling, and we're going to introduce you to Brittany Herrera, our very first Profiles Encourage story that will be introduced next month, December. Just a side note, on the Profiles Encourage stories, most of these stories will be every other month, unless the story is so amazing it needs to be told over a 2-month period. The Brittany Herrera story will be such a story. You will hear part 1 or watch part 1 next month, December, and her story will conclude in January as we bring on her Mary Kay director upline, Linda Klein, to finish up the story about the rise of Brittany Herrera, the Mary Kay distributor. But back to our first segment, politics and direct selling. Politics impacts everything that we do. It impacts every aspect of your life, whether you are aware of it or not. Decisions about how you're able to move about the country, excuse me, decisions about how you're able to move about the country, move around the world, hinge on political decisions made by people you may know or may not know at all. In most cases, you don't. It impacts your business. It impacts your life. It impacts your children's education. It impacts your school, their schooling. It impacts your general overall lifestyle. And DirectSellingLive believes that we need to look at politics, because politics is an area in which direct selling, particularly at the distributor level, should really get involved with, because we can do great things. My conversation with Joe Mariano, DSA President, which I'll get into in just a second, really speaks to that point. It was a great conversation. I think Joe Mariano is a great guy. I've known him for a little bit. He's a straight shooter. That's what I like about him. He's a straight shooter, unlike his predecessor, Neil Offit, who wasn't that into outreach, particularly with those people and organizations that were outside the DSA. Joe Mariano has shown that he is willing to extend a hand to have an atmosphere of inclusion, to at least listen to new ideas and concepts. That point alone makes him extraordinary as it relates to being over with the DSA, as I'm sure a lot of people who dealt with him can attest to. The politics and direct selling, we've hit on some pretty explosive things. We exposed the Amway founders, particularly Betsy DeVos and Dick DeVos, and their ties to the Koch brothers, Blackwater, the Republican Party, and their wishes to essentially buy the Republican Party so that they can push their values. And how does that conflict with their 3 million distributors who don't have a lot of the advantages that the founders have? We will continue on that story. There's absolutely no doubt about it. We're also going to be looking at some of the other direct selling companies that have political ties to other political parties, Democrats, independents, libertarians. We're going to talk about all of it. We're in a tremendous part of our country's history where we can talk about it. Granted, there are a number of people on who are involved in direct selling who think we should not have this conversation. In fact, I've been told by a number I absolutely should not even approach this. I happen to think otherwise. I happen to think the more we know about each other, the better we are, and the more we can support each other and support our community. Politics is the only game in town. It really is. Politics drives everything, and I'm all for it. We have invited the DSWA President Nikki Kihoho to come on to On Air and talk about the DSWA's position as it relates to women and their support for them in politics. I think the DSWA should really get into standing up for women's rights as it relates to women in the boardroom here in direct selling, where we only have about 20 to 25% of representatives in the executive level in direct selling are women. I think we need to get more involved with that. I think the DSWA should spearhead that. We've also invited MLMIA founder Doris Wood to come on as well and talk about the MLMIA's positions and what they're doing and things that they support. Other media in direct selling we've begun to reach out to. Keith Lagos over at Network Marketing Business Journal really gets into it when it comes to let everyone know what his views are in direct selling and politics. He and I, we really had a great time in 2008. I love Keith to death. He's a lot of fun. We don't always agree, but Keith's a great guy. He's just a lot of fun. He and his wife, Linda Bruno, over at Network Marketing Business Journal. So we've invited him to come on because if you've been reading his newspaper, his trade journal, he likes to attack the Obama administration for what he calls their interference in the progress of direct selling. Well, we would love for him to come on and explain more about that. As I said, Joe Mariano, I've known him for a bit. He's a nice guy. I got this surprise phone call from him. I really wasn't expecting it. After I broke the story on the on the DSA's Political Action Committee, I put a call into Adolfo Franco over at the DSA, who is the now secretary over there. At one point, he was head of regulatory affairs, I believe. But now he's a secretary. And when I looked at the DSA filings for their Political Action Committee, which they've had for years, they've had it for years, he is now the point person on that. So I called him to see if I could get some comments about it. And last week, on Thursday, I believe, I got a phone call and expecting and hoping that it would be Adolfo Franco. It ended up being DSA President Joe Mariano. I was really surprised that he would do that. He's just taken over as the president of the DSA, and like I said, he's already begun outreach. I know he's begun outreach with other organizations and associations that the DSA typically does not, so I think it's great. He is a Power 50 honoree, and as we stated in last year's Power 50, he's got a big job ahead of him. It is incumbent upon him to really reach out to other aspects of the community that don't always fit into the DSA's environment, but we're all one big community. So when he called, like I said, I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting Adolfo Franco, and in my preparation for Adolfo Franco, I was going to record the phone call and let Mr. Franco know that I'm going to record it. When the call came in from Joe Mariano, the recorder went into automatic record, and like I said, I was taken aback by the whole thing. It didn't even occur to me that it had even recorded. It did record, however, I'm not going to share any of it with you. There's no integrity there. There isn't anything secretive on it. I just believe that you should not play a recording of someone on the phone unless they have been made aware of it. So I'm not going to do that. However, I can tell you about bits of the conversation. We got to talking about the Political Action Committee. There were a couple of points that he just wanted to address to make sure that I was a little more clear on. But overall, in general, the conversation was really, really great. I enjoyed talking to him. We are of the same mind, he and I, for the most part. And that's typically what I get out of my conversations with him, that we want the best for direct selling. He knows that I am willing to push the envelope. I'm willing to bring forth issues and topics that most people want, because I think it's all about education and awareness and about transparency. Joe Mariano is very much about educating the community. When it comes to the Political Action Community, the DSA, it typically serves one group, and that would be the executives. And I'm going to go over some of the things that we talked about. Part 1 is today. We'll get into the criteria that they use to donate to political causes or politicians. So let me just get into it. One of the things that we talked about right away was he didn't know why I had made the assertion that distributors are not to be made aware of the Direct Selling Political Action Committee. Well, it's quite simple. I can make that assertion because they don't know. Nothing's ever been put in place. No mechanism has ever been in place to let them know that a political action committee represents them politically in this country. Executives know about it, and that has to do with membership more than anything else, according to Joe. And then I've done some additional research on it, but it comes down to memberships and who they can and cannot ask for donations. However, that does not mean who they can or cannot make aware that the political action committee exists. Whether or not distributors can participate, there's kind of a gray area there, because there are partners and partnerships that can donate to the political action committee. Distributors are not employees. They are business partners or independent business owners who are in partnership with a parent company who, even though the parent company and or corporations themselves cannot donate, executives of that company or corporation can. And oftentimes what you get is the executive donating X amount of dollars, and they have to identify what company or corporation they're with. So that attribute, for instance, John Smith, ABC Company, identifies that individual as being involved with this company or corporation. What the 2010 Supreme Court ruling did in this probably changes a lot of this. This is going to have some really, I believe, some really significant changes, because that ruling that corporations are people and can essentially donate to a cause or a political action committee or a political party really throws all this into a gray area. So it's going to remain to be seen where this all shakes out. But he's saying that they do want distributors to know about it. He says that their political action committee is a small entity. They would love for it to be larger so that they can, as he, just to paraphrase him, that way they could be more effective in public policy and the public policy debate. I think that is where I am in total agreement with him. We need to be more involved in the public policy debate as it not only relates to business, taxes, but also into the life and lifestyle of the global direct selling community and just the global community at large. The small entity that I talked about in 2010 brought in $74,000. I have done my investigating. I know which individuals at direct selling companies or executives donated money and to how much. I even know how much money the DSA donated to political candidates. That we will get into a bit tomorrow. I'm not going to get into which executive from which company by name of the individual donated to the DSA's Political Action Committee, but I will tell you which company had executives that did that. So they have $74,000 in 2010. They donated $37,000. So another $37,000 is sitting there. It's in this small entity. To me, $74,000 is not a small entity by any stretch of the imagination. And donating upwards of $40,000 is not a small donation either. He said, unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that the PAC exists. And I go back to this very same point. If you wanted distributors to know that it exists, you would make sure that they know. So since he wants them, this being Joe Mariano, to know that they exist, I'm sure he's now going to begin to take the steps, or I would hope so, that he would now begin to take the steps of letting distributors know that there is a political action committee that represents the direct selling community. It could be because we're such a large community, we are so diverse, we have so many ideas and concepts, and we represent so many different things, ideologies, that it could be unwieldy. We are probably the largest business community in the world. And if you can imagine, certainly here in the United States, the impact of such a community having a voice could be extremely powerful. But then how do you how do you bring that voice together so that it serves the overall good of the community, which is what a political action community is all about. I think it's worth investigating. I think we need to get into it. I've been approached about creating a DirectSellingLive political action committee. I don't see myself doing that. I love what I do, and I love politics, and I love representing the people who have the hardest time making it. My life was very much a struggle growing up. I've been asked, is your job just to represent women in direct selling, to represent the little guy? And I hadn't really thought about it, but I suppose it is. My background growing up and what my sisters went through and my family went through dictates that. It's just a natural outpouring of who I am. But back to Joe Mariano. Companies, he said, are not, and corporations are not allowed to donate to political action committees. Only executives and individuals can. And I go back to, yeah, that might be true. But the corporations, even though the individual needs to take money from their personal account, and it's not to be funneled from the company to the corporation, you and I both know that that's not how it works. We are beginning to see more and more of this in our politics after the 2010 January 21st Supreme Court ruling that companies are giving money directly to their executives to donate as an individual to the political action committee that they believe best serves their cause and their needs. This is such a gray area because it is saying that the companies on the behalf of this individual or who work for this particular corporation or company, this individual is giving money, is speaking for that company and for distributors, by extension, the distributors of that company. We got to do something about this. If you want people to know that the Political Action Committee exists, Mr. Mariano, Joe, you know, like I said, he's a friend and I like him a lot. I like a lot of people over at DSA. I like a lot of people over at DSWA. Great people, and MLMIA and Doris Wood. Just absolutely love them. However, we don't always agree. If you want them to know, let them know. We will continue to let them know. Executives have to tell, as I said, tell which company that they're with. Companies can only solicit, this is interesting. Companies, as he said, can only solicit donations when the members of that association give the Political Action Committee permission to do so. So the individual owner and company executive in direct selling are giving the DSA Political Action Committee permission to solicit them. This is how they make the executives and the companies aware that they have a Political Action Committee. As I said, the Political Action Committee for the DSA has been around for a long time. We're going to share some of the information a little more in depth tomorrow on as to who has donated, not the company executive. I will hold that back and do your own investigating on that, but the company executive and who they represented, more precisely who they represented, and what was the criteria that the DSA Political Action Committee donated money to politicians. I will tell you that the DSA, they are looking for those politicians that hold a very common view with the Direct Selling Association and Committee. So you have the Direct Selling Association Political Action Committee donating almost equally to both Republicans and Democrats. But it's interesting who they have donated to and why. So that's where we are with this. We're going to continue to dig into this. There is more to this. As I like to say, if there's a smoking gun, there's probably fire somewhere around it. And I'm thinking that there really is a lot of fire because distributors should know about it. They really, really should know about it. In very much the same way that I think you should know who your ownership and executives are donating to politically, because it might be at odds ideologically with your vision of life. You should align yourself primarily with people who have the same goals and aspirations as you. That's not to say that you won't do business with a company, because they, you know, their company and their products and their compensation might just be absolutely fantastic for you. But I think you should still be aware of who they are. Okay, up next, we're going to share with you the story of Brittany Herrera, the Mary-Kay distributor, the 22-year-old, who will be our first Profiles in Courage story. You're going to have to sit back and watch just this glimpse of who she is. But next month, hold on to your seats. Home sweet home for her is home is where the terror lived. We'll be right back. Imagine you are about 4 or 5 years old and your Navy SEAL father has just murdered your mother. To also throw into the mix, he begins to molest you and your sister. Also throw into the mix, he has decided to use his skills at psychology and brainwashing to get you and your sister to cop to the police that your grandparents have been for years molesting you. This is the story of Brittany Herrera, the very successful Mary Kay distributor, 22 years old, out of San Fernando Valley. It is a story of triumph. It is a story of courage. It is a story of the will to survive and the will to live. I'm going to introduce just a quick bit of her to you. But next month, we will roll out the very first part of a 2-part story on Brittany Herrera in our Profiles in Courage. Most of our Profiles in Courage will be every other month, except in an extraordinary circumstance where the story is so impactful it will need to be told over a 2-month period. The Brittany Herrera story is such a story. Take a moment now to quickly meet Brittany Herrera.
Hello, my name is Brittany Herrera and I'm an independent sales director with Mary Kay Cosmetics. And you're about to hear my life story before I became an independent sales director. My father had shot my mother because she was trying to get a divorce, and he was very violent. He was a Navy SEAL, so he was a pretty much trained killer. He had me and my sister, my older sister, go on trial and actually testify that my mother's parents were molesting us. And, you know, my dad had brainwashed us so well, and he always said, what Daddy says goes, no matter what, no matter what. We had a huge house, and he would take my older sister into this room, and whenever I'd walk into it, it'd smell like sex, and I was like 6 years old. He'd tell us to go to the closet, a walk-in closet, and pick a hanger, because on the palm of your hands you don't get bruised. And, so, you know, sometimes he'd get really crazy. He'd take weight belts. They were like this thick. And he would just start hitting us all over the place.
What do you think? I told you it was a very fascinating story. It is a story of really a profile in courage. A distributor story. These stories are meant to inspire. They are meant to let you know who we are, what we're all about. And if you've ever gone through anything like this, that you absolutely can succeed and achieve and move on. My own personal experience with my family growing up, I have a lot of the same similarities in the Brittany Herrera story are part of my family's story. So I can really connect with what she's talking about. It is traumatizing for a kid to go through things like this, but there is a tomorrow in most cases, and in most cases with that tomorrow there are opportunities to achieve and succeed and to move on and get your life back together. Her story is continuing right now. This story has not ended for her. Even though we will tell most of it in January, it is picked up again all of a sudden. The father has raised his head once again. We will continue to tell you more about it. Okay, that's our story for today. If you would like to be a guest on Air, contact us at OnAIR DirectSellingLive. Tell us why you should be a guest, what great story you have, what is it that you want to share with the community that you think is impactful. You need to be engaging. You need to also be willing to engage someone who may have a different point of view than you. So if you think that you want to be a guest on air, send your email to OnAIR@DirectSellingLive. Tell us who you are, what company you're with, and give us the story of why you think we should consider you to be on air. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.